It's been good to be here at the start of 5776. When I thought about coming here, I asked the Lord what to share, and He just kept saying Nehemiah, which is Hebrew for Nehemiah. And I said, why is that? And He said, because there's so many broken walls right now, and I need the cupbearers to arise and build the walls. So to get us in the right place for the cupbearers to arise, I've asked Martin to do a song while he's getting ready. Just to say, some of you will be cupbearers, but some of you will just be part of the team. Because Nehemiah never worked by himself. He always had a team. Because he knew he couldn't build a wall by himself. Nobody can. So I've asked Martin to, you ready? Okay, he's trying to get ready. But I'll just start. Yeah. Nehemiah was the cupbearer of a pagan king. And what you need to know is that Persia, where he was 1,000 miles away from Jerusalem. It wasn't like Jerusalem was down the road. It was 1,000 miles away. So he had to go pretty far to build a wall. We don't think he's ever been in Jerusalem before. So he went far to do this. And he had authority in Jerusalem because it was his land as an Israelite. You don't go build a wall where you don't have authority.
That's a good word. Remember that.
And Chuck never goes anywhere without an invitation. And an invitation gives you authority under the person who invites you. So I have asked Martin to sing a song called Glorious Ruins, because that's what we're called to do, is build up the glorious ruins.
When the mountains fall and the tempest roars, you are with me. When creation falls, still my soul will soar on your mercy. I walk through the fire with my head lifted high, and my spirit will rise in your story. I will look to the cross as my failure is lost in the light of your glorious grace. Let the ruins come to life in the beauty of your name, rising up from the ashes. God, forever you reign, and my soul will find refuge in the shadow of your wings. I will love you forever, and forever I'll sing. Let the ruins come to life in the beauty of your name. And my soul will find refuge in the shadow of your wings. I will love you forever, and forever I'll sing. Arise and build, arise and build. Let us arise and build. When the world caves in, still my hope will cling to your promise. When my courage ends, let my heart find strength in your presence. We will walk through the fire with our heads lifted high, and our spirits will rise in your story. We will look to the cross as our failure is lost in the light of your glorious grace. Let the ruins come to life in the beauty of your name, rising up from the ashes. God, forever forever you reign, and our souls will find refuge in the shadow of your wings. We will love you forever, and forever we'll sing. Let the ruins come to life in the beauty of your name. Rising up from the ashes, God, forever you reign. Our souls will find refuge in the shadow of your wings. We will love you forever, forever we'll sing. Arise and build, arise and build, arise and build.
Turn to somebody and say, "Rise and build."
So we're going to look at Nehemiah. If I say Nehemiah, you know what I'm talking about too. Nehemiah in Hebrew means the Lord is rest and the Lord is comfort. So God sent the Lord is rest to rebuild. You have to build out of rest. If you build out of striving, you'll hit your hand with the hammer. You'll make mistakes. You won't measure the walls right. Chuck is having to rebuild this room over here out of rest, because if he built out of striving, the walls would crumble. So Nehemiah...
So would Chuck.
This is what he did. He said, "How's Jerusalem?" And they said, "It's a mess. The walls are down and the gates are burned." Now, the walls had already been down over 100 years. It was not news that the walls were down, but the timing was right. The gates may have been freshly burned, but the temple was in place, but the walls were down. You can have worship in place, but if you don't have the structure to support it, it's chaos, which is what was in Jerusalem. As Chuck said yesterday, this may look like chaos, but there's structure here. Because if there wasn't, there would be no walls, because walls protect you, and walls help you feel safe, and walls guard you. And for over 100 years, there have been no walls in Jerusalem. Okay? So Nehemiah heard this news, and he prayed for 4 months. And then the kings one day said, "What's wrong with you? Why are you sad?" And he said, he got fearful when the king said that. But he'd already been praying for 4 months. You pray a long time before God sends you to rebuild a wall, because it's hard to do. And it may just be a wall in your family. It may be a wall in your neighborhood. It may be a wall in your children's school. It may be a wall in the government of your city. It may be a wall in your church. And it may be a wall in a nation. You got to hear the Lord on that. But there's a lot of crumbled walls right now. But you know what? After 100 years, it's not too late. God is not a time person. 100 years is nothing. So this pagan king, who was a nice king, gave him everything he needed. And he lived in Shushan. And Shushan, we know from the book of Esther, was a walled city. So Nehemiah knew what it was supposed to look like. But he had to go 1,000 miles. Now, from Persia to Jerusalem is one long, hot journey. It's like walking from Iran to Jerusalem. So think of that. Iran was to destroy us now. Nehemiah wanted to build us up. So the Lord is rest went to build up Jerusalem. The Lord is comfort went to build up Jerusalem. He didn't send another name there. He sent rest there. And we got to build out of rest. And that God built that into our lives with Shabbat, didn't he? Because he gave it to us every week. And if you miss it one week, you get to try again the next week. because just Shabbat's part of life. And you got to do it. You got to take it, and you got to rest. It's much easier to do it where I live than where you live, because we can't do anything. Everything's closed. Praise God. I can't go shopping on Shabbat. So Nehemiah did that. Now, it started with prayer, and the timing was right, and the distance didn't matter. When God sends you to rebuild a wall under the authority that's there, distance doesn't matter. God sent Chuck to Krakow in the middle of winter storms. It took a long time to get there, and it was a battle to get there, but distance didn't matter because he did what he was supposed to do. It took him 10 times as long to get there as it was that he was even there. I think he was there a few hours. They even had given his hotel room away when he got there. So it didn't matter. Distance doesn't matter in the kingdom when it's God sending you. He's going to New Zealand next weekend. Distance is far, but doesn't matter because the time is right. And he was invited by New Zealand, so he's coming under the authority of New Zealand. So it's timing. And you know, it's not about being qualified. He was the cupbearer of a king. What did he know about building walls? But God anointed him to build walls. So if you are a cook or a carpenter or a teacher or a mechanic, God can teach you how to build a wall. You know, Chuck majored in psychology. Brian majored in astronomy. Martin worked in a rare book room, and he writes a prayer update that impacts the world. You know, God sent me to Israel and said, build an army of youth. And I said, I've never been a mother. I'm not going to be a mother in this barren body. But he said, build an army of youth. And I said, I've never been in the army. And he said, you do it. Well, I wasn't qualified. But we started with 5 and 10 and 20 and 100, and it's still going on. And there's an army that doesn't even know my name anymore. Praise God. Because I just started it and built it and moved on, you know. Then he told me teach the children. A few years ago he said teach the children to pray for miracles. So I started that, and I thought, I'm too old to teach 4 to 8-year-olds about miracles. And you know what happened? Those 4 to 8-year-olds are now 9 to 12 years old. They have 2 worship bands. They can't stop worshiping. They're writing their own worship songs. And they're just running. Did I know what I was doing? Was I qualified? No way. But God said, do it. So it's not about qualified. It's about anointing. Just remember that. So we're called to build and rebuild. Isaiah 58 says this, 12. Those from among you shall build the old waste places. You shall raise up the foundations of many generations, and you shall be called the repairer of the breach and the restorer of the streets we live in. It's multi-generational. Building is always multi-generational. So let's look at Nehemiah and what he did. When he got to Jerusalem, after this 1,000-mile donkey ride and walk through the heat, this is what it said. I told no one what my God had put in my heart to do in Jerusalem, and the officials did not know where I had gone or what I had done. And I had not yet told the Jews, the priests, the nobles, the officials, or the others who did the work. He went in silence, and for 3 nights he checked it out. And I feel like the Lord is telling us when he gives you an assignment, be quiet until you have the strategy. We are so eager to put it on Facebook, internet,
It's a word
and
from God.
tweet
This is
it.
a word from God.
If you listen, Satan cannot read your mind, but the minute you say it out loud, he's got it. You better have strategy before you say it.
Let me make sure you understand that. The minute you release words into the atmosphere, that's when the enemy has the ability to intercept words. Then he uses familial spirits and familiar spirits to your either iniquitous bloodlines or the sin you're in to start using those words to actually capture you. So understand, when you get vision, there are times where you have to allow the vision to settle. You don't need to talk about it. You don't need to just say it. Or else just find one or two confidants that can help you through to either say, this is God and let's work this through and let me intercede for you, or we need to get some help for you. One or the other. And Ann will tell people sometimes, either you're taking too much meds or you're not taking enough meds. Some of you, sometimes we have to help people get in that order because the enemy starts using, he wants to thwart what God's saying to you. So you want to speak to the enemy with power and authority, but when you're developing vision, you have to wait and you have to walk and you have to listen and you have to move in time.
Yeah. Social media is great, but it's dangerous. So after 3 days and after 3 nights, this is what Nehemiah said. You see the distress we are in, how Jerusalem lies in waste and its gates are burned with fire. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem that we may no longer be a reproach. And I told them of the hand of God that had been on me and upon me and the king's words he said to me. So they said, let us rise up and build. And they set their hands to work. Now, those walls had been broken their entire lives. They never said, let's rise up and build. They were probably broken in their parents' lives. Now, those walls, archaeologists tell us, were 8 feet thick.
Wow.
Those are not little walls. So when they said, let us rise up and build, they had a lot of work to do. But they had an apostolic leader who could tell them what to do. You make sure you know who you're under so you know how to build. Because if you build without strategy, it'll fall down. So he had strategy in 2 phases. The first phase is he just put them around the wall in groups. He put the silversmiths somewhere. How did they know to build a wall? He put the perfumers somewhere. How did they know to build a wall? It even says there was Holahesh, the leader of a district in Jerusalem, and he and his daughters made repairs. And then people came from different regions and they started building the wall. And the minute they started, Sanballat came. Now, the minute you start, the enemy jumps in. And you know what Sanballat did? He just intimidated. And he thought, these are weak Jews. They've been sitting there for 100 years. That wall is a mess. There's no way they can rebuild it. And you know what Nehemiah did? He just kept building. Sanballat never got him off course. You can't listen to the enemy. You need to listen to the apostolic covering. Because the enemy is always there. And he always comes when you start building. Always. And then Sanballat came again, and the people this time got afraid. So Nehemiah said, let's do a new strategy. And here's the new strategy. He put them in families. And he said, let's build by families. And you know why?
That's key.
The Hebrew word for build is banah, beit nun hay. The Hebrew word for sons is banim, same word. The Hebrew word for daughters is banot. Hebraically, building and family is the same word. because when you build something, you're pulling your family in with it. And also when you build, the people you build with become family. But Nehemiah knew that if he put people as families, they would be more protective.
Now, hear what she just said for this year. It's not about just family, the way we think family, our bloodline. Who you build with becomes family. Now, that is important. And my family builds with me. Therefore, we're one in what we're building, but that isn't how it always works, and that isn't how it always was. So how you build and who you build with is a family dimension of God.
We have a lot of people that come visit us, and they will say, we want to pray here, we want to pray there. And when we agree with that, we do that, and they become family to us because they're helping us put not even a brick in the wall, maybe just a little rock in the wall, because the walls are big, and we just do it a brick at a time. But just remember, when you build, it's family. Can't build alone. And he never got off course. I mean, he was tormented. He was harassed. And he just said, God's going to fight for us. And we're going to rebuild this wall. And you know what? That wall that was down 100 years was rebuilt in 52 days. And that's what apostolic leadership does for you. It just changes time and seasons, and it gets old messes off the ground. This building was a ruined wall when they moved in, and God rebuilt it. Now, some of you know that. Now, you can be intimidated by the enemy right out of your vision. Be careful. And it says they had a hammer in one hand and a sword in the other. Now, this is interesting. I thought about this, and I thought, if you have a hammer in this hand and a sword in this hand and you're building the wall, what do you pay attention to? You pay attention to what you're building. You don't pay attention to the warfare. You just know it's there, you're ready, you have your weapons. But if you pay attention to the warfare, you will not build the wall right. You hear me? We get so focused, it's so hard in America.
Now, let's be sure that you're understanding you've got your weapon, your tool that you're building with. Some of you are very equipped, and you're very gifted. Look at somebody and say you got some great gifts and you got some great tools. But I deal with people all day long, all over the world. 95% of us are clueless to how to build and then cut the head of the enemy off at the same time. Some of you are very equipped, very talented, very gifted, and very creative, but unless you know and get that sword in place, the enemy is wiser than all the other types of creatures in the earth. Therefore, you have to become more wise than he and know how to thwart his headship. Now, Father, I'm going to pray another thing this year, and I'm going to pray that every one of us in here get more wise against the one who is opposing our abilities to come forth. Lisa Lyons is one of the most incredible people, wonderful. She's been with me for years. And yet I said, but one day you are sweet. You're filled with faith, but you've got to become shrewd to work with Brian and I. So she, for a whole year, said, I'll say, you're a wonderful woman. She said, and becoming shrewd. See, you've got to expand the way you think and the way you act.
Now, we got to learn that. And Every time, a few times Nehemiah said, rise up and build. And what he meant was rise up over the enemy and build. You rise up and build. Quit looking here, but have that sword in your hand. And Sanballat never stopped. And he said, come meet me here. And he said, no. And come meet me here. And he said, no. He said 4 times, come meet me here. And then he sent him a letter and said, let's do this. He never got off track. Don't read the enemy's letters.
All right, that'll preach. Now, we're trying to act right, but you better turn and preach that to somebody next to you. Better quit reading those enemy's letters. Next letter he sends you, you better chuck it in the trash. You better treat it like junk mail. You better look at it and say, I ain't even going to break the seal on that so it can invade me.
We all have delete buttons, don't we? Don't read that stuff. We don't even open things sometimes. Delete it. And they just kept building. So that in 52 days, on the 25th of Elul, which was when Chuck was in Israel last week, the 25th of Elul was a week ago, that wall was finished in 52 days, 8 feet thick, 1 mile around. Not by builders, by families. 52 days. You can do a lot in 52 days in the kingdom.
Let's ask the Lord to do something with us starting after Rosh Hashanah, after we get through the Feast of Tabernacles. We'll do 50 days of arising and building in all of us to get our vision refocused. We'll write prayer focuses. I'll send it out after, because you need to celebrate at Feast of Tabernacles. Look at somebody and say, you're going to have to get happy to build. Some of you, that's just the problem right there. You got to get happy to have strength to build. You got to have joy to build. And so Nehemiah talks about Feast of Tabernacles. So once we get through the week of Feast of Tabernacles, we'll start arising and building.
Now I'm going to tell you a few examples in Martin and I's life of building. About a month ago, he sent us to Paris to be with our friend, and then he said, Martin, go to that Jewish grocery store where the people were murdered and pray. So we got on a train and we went to the border of Paris, and we went in that grocery store, and the 3 of us just walked up and down the aisles praying and buying groceries. And we went outside and prayed, and Perrine talked in French to the guard who was heavily loaded. And in about 20 minutes, we just put a brick in that wall. That's all we did. Sometimes rebuilding a wall is quick. We didn't rebuild it. We just put a brick in it. But then there's other broken walls. So a year ago, right now, the Lord sent us a broken 16-year-old. And he said, a worship leader, a songwriter, broken to the core. I got him out of jail. And he said, rebuild this wall. So every other weekend, he comes to us. Now, it's not convenient. We have to drive an hour and 20 minutes to pick him up. And the weekend is Friday night to Saturday night. You got to get that. So we have to drive and pick him up. We have to talk to him. We have to set the boundaries. But he's just growing, and he's hearing the Lord. And he's having dreams, and he's having visions, and he's writing songs. And we have him for 2 more years till he goes to the army. So that wall is taking a little longer to rebuild. One time, I was in teaching school in Dallas, and I read a newspaper article about an 8-year-old boy who'd been locked in a closet, and when he got out, he'd murdered a baby. And I prayed for his 8-year-old boy. I thought, how could that happen? So I started school, and I built my classroom the first week, before the kids came. And I was ready to go, and then on the Friday afternoon, we had a meeting of the teachers, and the principal got a phone call, and she dismissed everybody, and she said, Norma, don't go. And she said, the head of the Dallas school district just called me, and on Monday morning, you have to start at another school across town. And I went, what? And she said, you talk to the director. So I talked to the director, and she said, there's 2 children that nobody can handle but you. So we're starting a class, and you know who the class was? It was the 8-year-old boy who'd murdered the baby. Because I'd prayed for him, and I'd prayed for his broken wall, and I got him, and I lived with him, and I had to move across town to do it. It wasn't did I know what I was doing with that? You know, his mother was a prostitute. I'd go to her house, and there were red beads hanging everywhere. And when she didn't want him, she just put him in the closet. And so he came out one day, and there's a baby. He was enraged, and he just killed the baby. Well, I got him because I prayed for him, and I helped rebuild his wall. He's an adult somewhere now. I don't know where he is. He never went to jail because it was abuse that did that, not him. But you just be careful what you pray, because Nehemiah prayed for 4 months, and he had to go to Jerusalem. Be careful what you pray. You may end up building walls that you didn't, It was great. I learned a lot about fasting. And praying. So it just happens, Sometimes you rebuild. He rebuilt, and he stayed there a few years, Nehemiah. But after the wall was built, he called the people to joy. And he put Ezra on the stage, and he said, let's read the law. Because you know what? If you rebuild a wall and you don't understand covenant, the wall will come back down. So he called the people back to covenant. And they got rid of their pagan wives. Now it's interesting. It tells you in Nehemiah 8:9, it says he called the people back together. They gathered as one man. And Ezra got on the stage, and it names everybody that was on the stage. And Nehemiah was not on the stage because that wasn't his place anymore. He put the priest on the stage to call the people back to covenant. And then he had them sign a covenant. And then he said, celebrate Shabbat. Honor Shabbat and honor the Feast of Tabernacles. Because if you don't honor Shabbat, if you don't rest, this man of rest called them back to rest. He called them back to covenant. Because you have to, you can pray for your marriage, and that wall can be healed. If you don't understand covenant, it'll crumble in 2 months. You can pray for your government, and if they don't understand the covenant with Israel, it'll crumble. It'll last for a little while, but covenant is part of building, and Nehemiah teaches us that. So we're called to covenant. We're called to joy. We're called to Shabbat. We're called to tabernacles. Nehemiah happened right now. It actually says they read the word until the sun was full. Now, in Israel, in this time of year, if you stand and read the word from early in the morning to noon, it is hot. And they had just finished building the wall, and they had the stamina and endurance to do that every morning until all the law was read. Amazing. Those people rose up and built, and then they rose up and covenanted. So know your covenant. Know how to do covenant. Don't just build. Build with covenant. And I think that's all I have to say. That it's just time to pray.
Let's thank God for that. Just incredible. Now, beginning Wednesday, we'll start completing. We'll get the sukkah completed. Notice we built it right out here. And we'll have lights in it, and we'll have a stand in there, and you can just come read the word. Just read it. Read it out loud. Read it into the atmosphere. And don't hesitate. If God gets you up at 3 o'clock and tells you to come up here and stand and read the word, come up and stand and read the word. and let the Word of God go forth for us for the season ahead. We've actually done this in Washington, D.C. It's been probably 10 years since we've done it in Washington, D.C. So you can sort of tell. What we want to see done this year politically is everything that is anti-God, anti-Israel. Let's just start with anti-Israel. We want to decree it gets run out. Now, we will not be able to stand in days ahead. We're fine as long as we stay aligned. Now, I want to say that. I want you to say that out loud. I'm fine as long as I stay aligned. Say it again. Now, let me show you one picture and then we'll take a break. Now, this is what the year looks like. Vav really is about connecting. So, watch how this works. Amen. That's all you need to remember this year. Get connected in the car you belong in.
What I forgot to say is that as the body, we're all called to rebuild Jerusalem. Don't forget that. Most of you, it'll just be prayer. But we're all called to help. We need help. We need to rebuild Jerusalem. Spiritually, we're not there. Morally, we're not there. And we are surrounded by enemies. So we are all called to rebuild. And we'll help you know how to pray that way. Martin will with his updates. So
always watch the Israel prayer updates.
Every one of those trains that you just saw, one way you can stand with us is pray for those train cars to get connected in Israel.
In Israel?
We do not have, the apostolic isn't in its place yet in Israel. The prophetic, we're seeing it amazingly coming up in the young ones.
It's been a year watching it really rise up.
But pray for the connection, because we get excited around the rest of the world when we see these moves and these things that are rising up, this movement or that movement of prophetic. Satan is doing his best to keep those cars from getting connected in Israel. Pray for them to get connected.
Now say it again. I'll be fine as long as I align. And I'll be great if I connect. Let's stand up. Now, Father, I thank you for everyone that is listening, everyone that will listen, everyone in this room. Lord, now turn around and look on the wall back there. We put that up there. That was the last piece we put in place for this week. And all of you in the back, you'll be able to look. It's right here on this side of the catwalk going across. It is a well springing out of an olive tree and producing miracles, signs, and wonders. Lord, I say, because we are coming into a new alignment, we're going to see the well of God come forth and spring forth, and miracles, signs, and wonders will begin to happen in new ways. Let's take a break. We'll start at 9:15. You might want to understand Shabbat better. Get Messianic Church Arising. Get Time to Prosper, and get The Rewards of Simplicity. Those three books help you understand Shabbat.
Hi, Martin. Hey there.